I still remember the exact smile the physician gave me. It wasn't cruel. That would have been easier to accept. It was the kind of practiced smile that quietly told you that your fear was inconvenient. "You've probably been spending too much time online," he said as he glanced at the computer instead of my face. "Your tests look fine. It's nothing serious." Nothing. That single word echoed inside my head while I sat on the paper-covered examination table, clutching the side of my abdomen so tightly my fingertips had gone numb. For 3 weeks, something inside me had felt terribly wrong. The pain had started as a dull ache but had become sharper every day. I couldn't keep food down. I woke drenched in sweat every night. My heart raced for no reason, and sometimes my vision blurred so badly I had to pull my car over. Still, according to him, I was simply anxious. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "So, that's it?" I asked quietly. He shrugged while typing into my chart. "I'll prescribe something for stomach irritation. Get some rest. Try yoga. Stress can cause surprising symptoms." Stress. Another word people loved using whenever they didn't want to look deeper. I nodded because arguing felt pointless. He had already decided what kind of patient I was before I had even opened my mouth. Outside the clinic, cold autumn air hit my face. I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes without starting the engine. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I almost ignored it. "Emily," she said the second I answered. "Did the appointment go well?" "They said it's nothing." "Oh, thank goodness." Her relief stung. "I don't think it's nothing." There was a pause. "You've always worried too much, sweetheart." I closed my eyes. Even my own mother believed I was overreacting. She had believed everyone else my entire life. When my older brother Jason broke my favorite violin as teenagers, I was told to stop being dramatic. When my cousin stole money from my college savings jar during Christmas, I was asked not to create family conflict. When Jason convinced Dad to hand him the family construction business, despite Dad promising it would someday belong to both of us, I was expected to smile and support him. I was always the reasonable daughter, the quiet daughter, the forgiving daughter. Somewhere along the way, everyone stopped listening because they assumed I'd forgive them anyway, including doctors. I drove toward home, but halfway there another wave of pain hit so violently that I had to slam on the brakes. My vision darkened. A stabbing sensation exploded through my lower abdomen. I gasped. Not cried. Not screamed. Gasped. Because it felt like every bit of air had been ripped from my lungs. Cars honked behind me. I barely heard them. My hands trembled so hard that my phone slipped between the seats. For several terrifying seconds I couldn't move. Eventually the pain eased enough for me to reach my phone. I called the clinic. The receptionist answered cheerfully. "I just left," I whispered. "The pain is getting worse." She put me on hold. When she returned, her voice sounded rehearsed. "The physician says your symptoms are consistent with anxiety. Continue the medication. If you're still uncomfortable tomorrow, schedule another appointment." Tomorrow. I thanked her even though I don't know why. I hung up and stared through the windshield. A little girl crossed the street holding her father's hand. She laughed. Life around me continued as though nothing was wrong. Maybe I really was imagining it. Maybe everyone else was right. I drove the rest of the way home. By evening I couldn't stand upright. Every breath hurt. Even lifting a glass of water felt impossible. My best friend Ava arrived after work carrying soup. One look at me and she froze. "Oh my God. I'm okay." "No, you're not. The doctor said." "I don't care what the doctor said." She knelt beside me. My skin felt icy. She touched my forehead. "Emily. You're freezing." "I'm just tired." "No." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." I shook my head. "I can't afford another hospital bill." "You can't afford to die either." The word hung between us. Die. It sounded ridiculous. I was 34. Healthy. I exercised. I had never even broken a bone. People like me weren't supposed to suddenly collapse in their living room. Then I tried standing. Pain ripped through me so violently that I blacked out. Voices floated around me. Blood pressure dropping. "We're losing her. Get another 4. Someone slapped my cheek gently. "Emily? Stay with us." I opened my eyes for only a second. Bright ambulance lights blurred above me. A paramedic squeezed my hand. When did this start? This morning. No, Ava interrupted from somewhere nearby. 3 weeks ago. The paramedic's expression changed instantly. 3 weeks. He looked at the paperwork from the clinic lying beside my purse. You saw a physician today? Yes. What tests did they run? Basic blood work. He muttered something under his breath that I couldn't hear. The ambulance accelerated. Sirens screamed. Everything became fragments. Needles. Masks. Someone cutting away my sweater. A monitor suddenly erupted into loud alarms. Then darkness swallowed everything again. When I woke, harsh operating room lights hovered above me. Faces hidden behind surgical masks surrounded the table. One surgeon looked directly into my eyes. We're taking you into emergency surgery right now. What? What's happening? You have severe internal bleeding. I stared at him, unable to understand. Internal bleeding? How? We'll explain later. I'm going to. No, he said firmly while squeezing my shoulder. We're going to do everything we can to save you. The anesthesiologist leaned over me. Count backward from 10, 9, 8, 7. I thought about Mom saying it was nothing. About the physician smiling. About every moment I'd question my own instincts because everyone else insisted they knew my body better than I did. By the time I reached 5, tears had slipped into my hair. Not because I was afraid of dying. Because I realized how close I had come to believing that my own pain wasn't real. And somewhere beyond the operating room doors, the physician who had dismissed me only hours earlier had no idea that an entire team of surgeons was now fighting to save the life he had so casually told me not to worry about. When I opened my eyes again, everything felt impossibly heavy. My throat burned from the breathing tube that had already been removed. My abdomen throbbed with a deep ache unlike anything I had ever imagined, and every breath seemed to pull against stitches hidden beneath the blanket. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, dotted with fluorescent lights that blurred every time I blinked. A nurse noticed I was awake. Emily? Can you hear me? I managed the smallest nod. You're in the intensive care unit. Surgery went well. My lips barely moved. What happened? She hesitated for a moment before answering. You lost a dangerous amount of blood. The surgeons found a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. I stared at her. No. You were very close to dying. The word settled over me like ice. A ruptured ectopic pregnancy. I had read about it years ago. A pregnancy developing outside the uterus. If it ruptured, it could cause catastrophic internal bleeding. Something that required immediate medical attention. Something that should never have been dismissed as anxiety. Tears rolled silently into my hair. Not because I had lost a pregnancy I hadn't even known existed, but because hours earlier I had begged someone to listen. Someone whose job was to recognize exactly this kind of emergency. A few minutes later, the surgeon entered my room. His tired eyes suggested he'd been awake for far too long. I'm Dr. Reynolds, I whispered. Am I alive because of you? He smiled gently. You're alive because your friend refused to give up. He pulled up a chair. The bleeding had already become severe by the time you arrived. Another hour, possibly less, and you likely wouldn't have survived. I closed my eyes. Another hour. I remembered sitting in my car outside the clinic, wondering if I was simply overreacting. Dr. Reynolds continued carefully. I reviewed the notes from your appointment earlier today. His expression hardened. They didn't order the tests I would have expected considering your symptoms. I swallowed painfully. I kept telling him something felt wrong. I know. He said it was stress. The surgeon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the window. I can't comment on another physician's judgment while everything is still being reviewed. That sentence told me everything. When he left, Ava slipped quietly into the room carrying a paper cup of coffee she clearly hadn't touched. The second she saw my eyes open, she burst into tears. You scared me to death. I'm sorry. No. She grabbed my hand carefully. You stop apologizing. For once I didn't argue. She leaned closer. The surgeon told me everything. I nodded weakly. He said if we'd waited until morning. Neither of us finished the sentence. She squeezed my fingers. I almost listened to you. What? When you said you wanted to stay home. She wiped away fresh tears. I almost let you. You didn't. No. Her voice became firmer. And I never will again. For the first time since waking up, I smiled. 2 days later, my parents arrived. Mom rushed into the room first, crying before she even reached my bed. Oh, sweetheart. She hugged me carefully. I thought we were going to lose you. I hugged her back, though something inside me remained strangely still. Dad stood silently near the door. Jason came last. He looked uncomfortable, as if hospitals made him nervous. I heard it was pretty serious, he muttered. Pretty serious. I almost laughed. Mom sat beside me. I can't believe this happened. I looked directly at her. I called you after my appointment. She nodded. You said they told you it was nothing. I also told you I didn't believe them. Silence filled the room. Her eyes slowly lowered. I know. You told me I worry too much. She covered her face. I did. I almost believed you. She began crying harder. I'm so sorry. For years those words had been enough. This time they weren't. Not because I hated her. Because apologies don't stop internal bleeding. They don't erase years of teaching someone to doubt themselves. Dad finally spoke. We trusted the doctor. So did I. No one knew what else to say. Jason shifted awkwardly. At least everything worked out. I looked at him in disbelief. Everything worked out? I had nearly died. I had lost part of my reproductive system during emergency surgery. I would carry physical and emotional scars for the rest of my life. Nothing had simply worked out. After they left, I cried harder than I had since childhood. Not because I wanted sympathy, because I finally understood something. The people who loved me weren't necessarily the people who truly hurt me. 3 weeks later, I was finally home. Walking still hurt. Laughing hurt. Even climbing stairs exhausted me. One afternoon, a certified envelope arrived. The hospital's quality review department requested a meeting. Ava insisted on driving me. Inside the conference room sat Dr. Reynolds, a hospital administrator, a patient safety investigator, and a woman from risk management. The administrator spoke first. We've completed a preliminary review. He slid several documents across the table. The physician you saw failed to document several symptoms you clearly reported. I looked down. Entire sections of my medical history were missing. The vomiting, the worsening abdominal pain, the dizziness, even my request for further testing. It wasn't there. He didn't write any of it. No. The investigator folded her hands. We've also reviewed the clinic's phone recording from after your appointment. My heartbeat quickened. The call. The one where I begged for help. The recording confirms that you reported worsening pain shortly after leaving the clinic. I felt sick. He still told me to wait. She nodded once. There will be a formal investigation. 4 weeks afterward, investigators interviewed nurses, paramedics, laboratory staff, and everyone involved in my care. The ambulance crew confirmed my blood pressure had been critically low. The emergency surgeons documented that my condition had been life-threatening upon arrival. Every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. My symptoms hadn't been invisible. They had been ignored. Then something unexpected happened. A nurse from the clinic contacted me privately. She asked if we could meet somewhere away from the hospital. We sat in a quiet coffee shop one rainy afternoon. She looked terrified. I probably shouldn't be doing this. You don't have to. No. She took a shaky breath. You deserve to know. She slid a folded notebook page toward me. I was assisting during your appointment. I recognized her immediately. She had avoided eye contact that day. I remember you. Her eyes filled with guilt. I told him your blood pressure concerned me. I froze. What? He dismissed it. She looked down at her coffee. I suggested sending you to the emergency department. My chest tightened. He laughed. I couldn't speak. He said. Her voice cracked. She's another healthy young woman convinced Google diagnosed her. The cafe suddenly felt silent. Every sound disappeared except my own heartbeat. The nurse looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I slowly unfolded the paper she'd given me. It wasn't official documentation. It was a copy of the notes she had written for herself immediately after my appointment. Notes that mentioned my dangerously abnormal vital signs and her recommendation for emergency evaluation. Those notes had never made it into my medical record. Someone had made sure they disappeared. And in that moment I realized this case wasn't just about one careless diagnosis anymore. It was about decisions made after I walked out of that exam room, decisions that someone had apparently tried to erase. For a long time, I simply stared at the handwritten page in my hands. The nurse's notes weren't dramatic. They weren't emotional. They were precise. Patient pale. Guarding lower abdomen. Blood pressure lower than expected. Reports worsening pain, dizziness, vomiting. Recommended emergency evaluation. Physician declined. Asterisk asterisk. Each line felt heavier than the last. I looked up at her. Why wasn't this in my chart? She shook her head slowly. I don't know. I only know that when I checked your electronic record later that afternoon, none of my observations were attached anymore. You reported them. I did. And then they disappeared. She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. I've worked as a nurse for 12 years. I've never seen anything like it. For the first time since the surgery, anger replaced fear. Not the kind of anger that made me want to scream. The kind that made everything suddenly become crystal clear. Someone had almost cost me my life. Then someone had tried to make it look as though the warning signs had never existed. That evening I called an attorney. His name was Daniel Brooks, and unlike nearly everyone else I'd spoken to over the previous month, he didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he asked only one question. Do you want revenge? Or do you want accountability? I thought about it for several seconds. If I wanted revenge, I finally said, I would want him to feel afraid. And I don't. What do you want? I want the next woman who walks into that clinic to be believed. There was silence on the line. Then let's make that happen. The legal process moved far slower than television dramas had ever suggested. There were depositions, independent medical experts, endless requests for records, and interviews that lasted hours. The physician maintained that my symptoms had been nonspecific. Then the phone recording was introduced. The jury heard my trembling voice. Asterisk, the pain is getting worse. Asterisk. Then they heard the receptionist place me on hold. Then they heard the message relayed back. Asterisk, the physician recommends continuing your medication and calling tomorrow if you're still uncomfortable. Asterisk. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear someone turning a page. Next came the ambulance report. Then the emergency surgery records. Then Dr. Reynolds testified. He remained calm throughout. In my professional opinion, he said, the patient displayed multiple red flags that required immediate emergency evaluation. Earlier intervention would almost certainly have prevented catastrophic internal bleeding. The physician's attorney tried to challenge him. So you're saying every patient with abdominal pain requires surgery? No. Then how can you be certain? I'm certain because she wasn't every patient. He pointed toward my medical file. She was this patient. His words settled over the courtroom with remarkable force. Then came the nurse. She looked nervous as she took the witness stand. She admitted she had recommended emergency treatment. She explained that her observations disappeared from the official chart. When asked whether anyone instructed her to remove them, she answered carefully. No. Did you remove them yourself? No. What happened? I don't know. The jury didn't miss the significance. Neither did the medical licensing board sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. Months later, before the trial even reached its conclusion, the state medical board announced disciplinary proceedings. An independent forensic audit of the clinic's electronic records revealed something no one had expected. My chart wasn't the only one that had been altered. Several patient records contained unexplained edits after appointments had ended. The investigation widened. Former employees began coming forward. One described constant pressure to shorten appointments. Another admitted concerns about overlooked symptoms being dismissed as anxiety or stress. A third produced emails encouraging physicians to reduce referrals for expensive imaging whenever possible. None of those documents mention my name. They didn't need to. A pattern had begun to emerge. News organizations picked up the story. At first, reporters wanted dramatic interviews. I declined every request. Then one journalist wrote me a handwritten letter instead of sending another email. She ended it with a single sentence. Asterisk, if you ever decide to speak, I'd rather tell the truth than chase a headline. Asterisk. So I met her. I didn't attack the physician. I didn't insult the hospital. I didn't exaggerate. I simply told the story exactly as it happened. How easy it had been to doubt myself. How quickly pain became anxiety. How dangerous those assumptions could become. The interview aired on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, hundreds of messages had arrived. Women wrote that they'd been told they were overreacting before later being diagnosed with appendicitis, ovarian torsion, autoimmune disease, heart conditions, and internal bleeding. Men wrote too, thanking me because their wives, daughters, sisters, and mothers had finally felt seen. I read every message. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I smiled. For the first time, surviving felt like it had a purpose beyond my own life. Nearly 18 months after my surgery, the case finally ended. The settlement remained confidential, just as most medical settlements do. People often assumed the money was the victory. It wasn't. The real victory arrived the following week. The clinic announced sweeping reforms. Every patient reporting severe abdominal pain would receive standardized emergency screening. Nurses were given independent authority to escalate critical cases. Electronic medical records now permanently logged every edit with visible timestamps. No entry could quietly disappear again. The physician who had dismissed me was no longer practicing at that clinic. Several months later, the medical board suspended his license pending mandatory retraining, supervision, and competency review before any future return to practice. When I heard the decision, I didn't celebrate. I simply sat in my backyard with a cup of tea. Ava joined me. So, she asked, do you feel like you won? I watched the sunset settle across the trees. I don't think anyone wins after something like this. She nodded. But maybe something good survived. She smiled. You did. I laughed softly. That too. A year later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a short handwritten note. Asterisk, you don't know me. I went to that clinic last month with severe pain. The nurse insisted on sending me to the emergency department because of the new protocol. My appendix had ruptured. The surgeon said another hour could have killed me. Asterisk. There was no signature. Only one final sentence. Because you refused to stay quiet, my children still have their mother. I folded the letter carefully and carried it inside. It now rests in the drawer beside the hospital bracelet I wore the night surgeons fought to save my life. People sometimes ask whether I ever forgave the physician. Forgiveness isn't something another person earns simply because time passes. For me, forgiveness meant refusing to let bitterness become my identity. It meant rebuilding a life that wasn't defined by one terrible day. I still have the scar across my abdomen. Some mornings it aches when the weather changes. Every time I see it, I remember lying on that examination table, hearing someone tell me, it's nothing. I no longer hear those words as a dismissal. I hear them as a reminder. Our bodies whisper before they scream. Pain is not a personality flaw. Fear is not evidence of weakness. And the quiet voice inside us, the one insisting that something isn't right, is sometimes the most truthful voice we'll ever hear. Hours after one physician decided I wasn't worth another look, an entire team of surgeons fought to keep my heart beating. The greatest revenge was never watching someone else's career fall apart. It was walking back into the sunlight, refusing to doubt myself again, and knowing that because I chose accountability over hatred, countless strangers would be heard before it was too late.